Is it proper for a peer counselor to target, lie about, and cause distress to a mentally ill individual? How long can they do this and still be considered a mental health advocate? Hello, everyone. So, just a couple of updates. Asher at this moment does not have a social media or internet presence, as at the moment he is in the hospital. It is a result of the mounting emotional, psychological, and physical effects that 18 months of cruelty and Liana Kerzner's campaign of lies and abuse have taken on him. These are the effects of being erased, rewritten, and misrepresented by someone with a large audience who claims to be a mental health advocate, yet the nature of her actions when in conflict speak differently.
Of course, he goes on the internet. She hurt me. She mental health stigma. She this, she that. I'm going to throw another tantrum. I'm not throwing a tantrum. How dare you say I'm throwing a tantrum? I'm going to have another tantrum until you give me what I want. That is what adults do. And the very problem with this person is that he speaks in... And by the time you get to the end, you have no idea what the hell the guy's saying. And so you're like, okay, this, no, and he gets all mad, and then he does it again. But oh no, that woman, she's lying. I was clear, she's lying. And these are people of, yes, officer, I understand I have mental health problems, when the cop's right there. Oh, poor, yes, I'm in therapy. Yes, I know I have problems. I'm struggling. Go freaking crazy. How dare she on the internet the minute the cop's back is turned. That's seriously who we're dealing with here. And that, oh, yes, officer, I realize I have mental health problems. I'm working on them.
I'm being harassed by a mentally ill person in your area. I don't know where to file a police report or ask for a wellness check, quite honestly. I don't know how to say it other than there's some delusional thinking going on here. He's blaming me for everything. Okay, he does have borderline personality disorder, which is my concern. He's been saying he's an anthropomorph, which is part animal as well.
And, people in the know say he talks the way serial killers talk. That is sobering, and that makes me glad I called the police.
Sure, but we don't want to become, we're here to help. We're not here to be a burden on you. So I appreciate your understanding, and if we can just get the full scope of what's going on, that way we can touch base with both sides and hopefully put this behind you.
And do I think that man's normal? No.
Is this someone who should be deciding what is normal when not being normal is accompanied with a call to the cops? Once again, Liana Kerzner has started to lie again about the Kickstarter event and other things, rehashing her story yet again with variations. She's trying to kickstart this cycle yet again. However, that's not going to happen. I will address the Kickstarter specific lies tomorrow, but this episode belongs to Asher. It is hard to convey the full effect that the last 18 months have had on Asher. Imagine, if you will, suddenly having your voice taken away from you. Suddenly having someone who tells the world that they know what your true motivations, your true thoughts, your true intentions are, overriding everything you say with their interpretation. And because of the size of their platform, people believe them over you, over your very own words. Imagine being interpreted, being rewritten every day of your life for 18 months. Coming to feel that it doesn't even matter if you exist. You might as well not exist, because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, the other person has isolated you, has ensured that no one looks and reads what you say and write. And instead, they look to them for the Rosetta Stone of your being. And what is presented is a disfigured caricature of horror, dysfunction, a convenient puppet in your image upon which the interlocutor can cast all sins imaginable and you scream, "That is not me. That's not me." But nobody hears you. That is akin to what Asher has experienced at the hands of Liana Kerzner over the last 18 months. I can't faithfully convey it, but he can. Shortly before Asher had to go to the hospital, I was recording what would have been this episode with a different approach when he finally broke down. The microphone was recording, and so you need to hear this.
I know I can't. Because I'm not myself. They're also concerned about their memory. I don't know what to do. I can't do this. I can't do this. It's too much. I can't do it. It's too much. I'm buried under it.
I hate having to put my husband on display at his most vulnerable like that. But because of what Liana Kerzner does, unless I show it to you, she's going to make you believe that it isn't real. Just like when Asher here talked about how much pain he was in and how much he was cracking under what she was doing, Liana Kerzner mocked him. There are no lies except the ones she's been telling, and we'll get to those. Even right before Asher went to the hospital, Liana Kerzner was still overriding his very being. By repeating, for example, the false claim that Asher is transphobic. Here. Liana Kerzner needs this bit of fiction to remain in place so that the entire structure of lies that she has built in order to escape accountability for her part of the delays on the Kickstarter can hold up. But it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. We will deal with the Kickstarter again in the next episode, so I'm going to focus on the lie here. And now we're going to expose the lie. You'll notice that Liana Kerzner always spares her audience the details. She masquerades it under false consideration, when in truth she does it so that people don't actually know the details, and so she can paint whatever painting she wants of a person. The first person is Liana Kerzner's left-hand henchperson, Naomi Polperu. The reasons under which Asher called this particular person out can be seen here on the Discord server. After asserting the existence of communications between Naomi and Asher that didn't actually exist, Naomi then goes to state that Asher's furry identity exists only as a means of seeking attention. Whereas, at this moment, they juxtapose it with their cross-dressing, which is so much more meaningful. Yes, so what you are seeing here is someone from Liana Kerzner's Discord server, one of Liana's esteemed community members, essentially shitting on someone else's identity, while obviously expecting their identity to be respected. Asher confronted Naomi Polperu with essentially the verbiage of, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you putting my identity down while also bolstering yours?" Asher was essentially pointing out the underlying hypocrisy in Naomi's position, because it is a massively hypocritical position that she has. Pointing out that it was Naomi who essentially made it all about attention. Now, interestingly enough, of course, Liana Kerzner, being semi-illiterate, which is the only conclusion I can come to at this point, looked at this exchange and completely disfigured it into portraying it as Asher claiming that Naomi was only cross-dressing for attention. Liana Kerzner actively discourages people from looking into the events that she describes. After all, She wants to spare you the displeasure. So, of course, she becomes the only person that people get information from. Now, I want you to look at the sheer level of dishonesty here. She completely rewrote the argument, the motives, and the events. Asher didn't dox Naomi Polperu. He quoted a chat from a Discord server that you can access for $1. That is not doxing. However, it is convenient to say it's doxing. That way, she does not have to actually provide proof of the event. She's being considerate after all. Liana Kerzner also completely rewrites the motivations because she claims that the reason Asher, quote, doxed Naomi was because Naomi agreed with Liana that people shouldn't be doxed, except that Asher's motivations were in the very same screenshot and in his tweets, where he essentially confronted Naomi saying, "You said this about my identity while also flattering your identity. This is hypocrisy." Notice that Liana completely leaves all of that out and she inserts her own completely made up interpretation of events that don't hold up once you look at the evidence. And that's because Naomi Polperu doesn't matter as a person. Not to Liana Kerzner. Naomi Polperu only matters as an identity that Liana Kerzner can wield as a sword and shield in order to hide herself from the accountability of her own words and actions. And a surprising number of people in Liana Kerzner's servers and community do the exact same thing. I want you to look at what Asher said and what he was actually targeting and addressing. His beef with Naomi. And I need to ask you, was that actually transphobia? Or was it about someone being reasonably upset that a third party shat on his identity and this person confronted that third party and took them to task? And I think it's very telling that Naomi Polperu and Liana Kerzner pulled on the transphobia card instead of actually addressing the problem, which is what Liana Kerzner does all of the time. The second trans creator is Vivid Faye Garden, also known as Sage, Poppy's ex. And the reason Asher was mocking her had nothing to do with her gender identity. In fact, it had to do with the fact that Sage has an extremely contradictory position about privacy in public, where she apparently believes that you have a reasonable expectation of privacy when you go out in public. And as one of her examples, she cited how she thought that the CEO who was caught cheating while attending a concert was harming society, and so that therefore people should be able to be private in public, which is a nonsensical position. The contradiction was exacerbated even more when Sage started reposting Maya Arson Crime U, celebrating all of the breaches for Peter Thiel's dialogue server. Now, Asher can't stand Peter Thiel, but that is neither here nor there. Asher was pointing out that Sage's own position was completely self-contradictory. But to Liana Kerzner, that is transphobia. So I want you to really, really think about that, okay? Because again, she rewrote the entire reason why Asher did this. It was an intellectual disagreement on principles, and Liana Kerzner turned it into, if you disagree with a trans woman or you mock a trans woman, you're transphobic. She doesn't care about what it is that you're mocking. She only cares that a trans woman is the one receiving the mockery, and therefore that makes it transphobic. Which goes to show that Liana Kerzner doesn't actually see people as people. She sees them as resources or as labels or identities, and the person doesn't really exist to her. It's also the reason why when you criticize her or you have beef with her, you must be misogynistic or genderphobic. You can't actually have a problem with Liana Kerzner for being herself. So, was Asher transphobic because he disagreed with Sage on how privacy should work in public? It also bears noting that during this exact same period when Asher confronted Naomi Peru and Sage, he also was arguing with individuals who were cisgender men and women over the fact that these people were talking about men as nothing more than flesh and pleasure toys for women to essentially milk. And there was an entire person who kept saying that he hoped that his dick was more important than his personality. But, Liana Kerzner doesn't tell you about these other fights that Asher had. Because then the whole pattern of him being uniquely fixated on trans individuals doesn't hold up, because Sage and Naomi are just two examples in, say, 10 arguments he might have had with non-trans individuals. That's because Liana Kerzner is a dishonest person, and she uses cherry picking to tarnish people's reputations. And so far you're seeing the kind of thing that Asher has had to deal with for 18 months of sheer mendaciousness and malicious dishonesty. And this is just two examples. Imagine everything you do, everything you say, day in, day out for 18 months being recast in this fashion, not only in Liana Kerzner's social media like Blue Sky and Threads, but also her YouTube channel and her radio show. And you'll have an idea of what it has been like for Asher. No one is safe from being rewritten by her. In fact, here is exact proof to it. This is a post I made about harm minimization and why that strategy doesn't work, because it allows abusers to thrive. Liana Kerzner looked at what I wrote and said this. You see what she did? In one fell swoop, she has told you that I wrote something that I didn't actually write, because my entire post is why I don't believe in practicing the strategy of harm minimization, because avoiding conflict and avoiding direct confrontation only lets abusers get by. Aside from the fact that no, we haven't doxed her. This woman doesn't understand the concept of words. Everything is fluid. Everything is nothing more than shadows in her mind that she can rearrange for you to believe whatever it is that she wants you to believe. I also didn't suggest that her husband was abusing her. That is a narrative that she completely came up with on her own. I suggested that she was covering up for him. That was it. So, from this point on, anytime she claims someone wrote something, someone said something, demand proof. Because this woman can't be trusted. And I'm showing you exactly proof in what she did to Asher, what she just did to me. Look at it. Now, the third claim is actually something that requires a tiny bit of explanation. You see, for the longest time now, Liana Kerzner has decided that she knows what men really mean, what men really want. She understands men in a very unique way because she claims that she is gender nonconforming and that she is practically male-coded. This is the conceit behind which Manly Mondays and her excuse to tell men what the problem with men is comes from. Liana also says that she is not stereotypically feminine, that she doesn't match the markers for feminine performance, and instead is more aggressive, more male-coded in her approach to conflict, which is something that she also ascribes to growing up in Jane Finch.
Oh, I'm not a gender non-conforming person. I'm a pick-me girl. Because I understand where guys are coming from. That in itself is just non-binary erasure, that whole term. Right? This is a room full of people, Guy. Do you really think I believe you're gonna take a swing at me here? For real? I was raised at Jane and Finch. This was a regular week at school. I'm so called scary when I'm angry. Just because I don't do the whole, oh, I'm a victim, right? I'm like, whoa, freaking Wolverine, man. Make yourself look bigger. Make yourself, don't mess with me. Because when I feel strongly about something, I don't care how anti-woke it is. I'm like, bring it. You know, I'm like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. You call this a storm?
Now, there is also another narrative that runs parallel through this, throughout Liana's rhetoric, and it is that Asher has displayed unique rage against women, both cisgender women and trans women, which shows that he is, outside of being transphobic, that he's also misogynistic. Asher looked at these two competing claims and decided to give Liana Kerzner exactly what she wanted, and I'll explain in just a second. You see, if you look at Asher's social media history, which now you can because both his Twitter archive and his Blue Sky archive are up, you're going to see one thing that is very recurrent. Every time Asher has argued with women, both cis and trans women, he usually argues at a much lower intensity than he normally does with, say, men. That is a matter of record, and that can be substantiated through multiple archives. And Liana Kerzner actually knows this because she has seen Asher argue over the 5 years that they were friends. However, Asher did take her account seriously in this sense. If Liana Kerzner is indeed male-coded, then she should have no issue whatsoever in being confronted from, say, the perspective of a male fighting with a male, and that level of intensity, right? Because again, she knows where men come from, so she totally would understand that. And it would also show by comparison that Asher had been treating her like a woman in his arguments in the past when referring to her, and that actually he didn't display special rage towards cisgender women and trans women. He was actually displaying more deference than he does to men, even if he is still contentious. And so, Asher essentially did, wow, I'm Wolverine,
Whoa, freaking Wolverine, man.
and basically dialed it up to 11, including the kind of insult that you would find in, say, a guy confronting a guy who's been fucking with him for 18 months, such as, go jerk one off and see if you feel better. You know, typical guy stuff on that front. So, if Liana Kerzner is indeed the man whisperer, she would know exactly what this is, and she would have responded in kind. That is, she would have gone,
Whoa, freaking Wolverine, man.
well, then how did she react?
Oh, I'm the victim.
Yeah, she basically clutched her pearls and went into the most female-coded complaint ever on the internet. Kind of proving Asher right, because you see, for months Asher has observed that Liana Kerzner seems to claim that she is male-coded or that she is gender non-conforming, non-feminine performing, so that she can sort of hide her calloused and cruel behavior behind that facade, that bravado. But anytime that she actually gets pushback or gets confronted, she switches into the other end of the spectrum. She's no longer male-coded. She goes from a very female-coded response. And all of it always geared towards making herself look like the biggest victim. So here we have the claims completely debunked that Asher shows any special rage or obsession toward trans women. And in fact, the record shows that Liana Kerzner was just cherry picking. And furthermore, Liana Kerzner does something very interesting here. See, the thing that she always leaves out is actual context. You'll notice that she talks about people. For example, she talks about Asher like he just goes out with possessed by some wild spirit and goes out into the forest of the internet and goes looking for any random trans woman to get into a fight with, which is nonsensical. But Liana's image of Asher, the image that she has manufactured, the counterfeit that she has manufactured, already paints him as someone who is not capable of a reasonable response. So, of course, it fits this bastardized image. But she leaves out, for example, that in the first cases where he argued with trans women, one of them was Poppy, and then the other women that were involved in the next arguments were tied to Poppy. So people from that person's own circle. So did Asher argue with them because they were trans, or did he argue with them because they were in Poppy's circle and were either defending Poppy or it was a fight adjacent to the Poppy drama? See, that whole context changes Liana Kerzner's lie. It really shows that she is painting a reality that isn't there. And in this case, for example, when talking about how Asher has this obsession with trans people, one of them was Naomi Paul Peru, and I've already shown you the issue. But you see, it's almost like for Liana Kerzner, no one can criticize her or anyone in her server or her community for their actions. And this is actually kind of pathological. Because if I can't criticize your actions without you saying, oh, he's being misogynistic, oh, he's being transphobic, when the critique had nothing to do with your gender identity, then you are clearly using your identity as a shield, and you are one of the people who is ruining things for all trans and queer people out there because you're a crybaby. Even the issue with Naomi Paul Peru wasn't about the fact that Naomi Paul Peru was gender fluid. It was the fact that she was shitting on someone's identity while expecting her identity to be respected. And you can't do that. But in that Blue Sky archive, there is proof, actually, for a lot of what I've said. Yes, you can look through all of the entries in the Blue Sky threads, but one particular one is very, very indicative. That is Asher's fight with Willie Wiles. Who is Willie Wiles? Well, Willie Wiles, up until recently, was a friend of Poppy's, a cis male who, I don't quite know how to say this, except content warning regarding these screenshots. Yeah, Willie Wiles has a very interesting account history because he is constantly making death fantasies posts and rape fantasies. And yeah. Incidentally, Liana Kerzner was floating in this circle because this is the Poppy verse, and Liana Kerzner talked very openly to Annie Gallagher, the virtuous pedophile, who was friends also with Willie Wiles. For all of her condemning of Asher, Liana Kerzner never even spared a breath on Willie Wiles, and his behavior was actually atrocious when you compare it with Asher. Asher's biggest sin for Liana was that he's contentious. But you see, Willie Wiles never criticized Liana Kerzner, whereas Asher did openly criticize all of Liana Kerzner's contradictions. So therefore, Asher was the one who was committing the capital sin. Willie Wiles actually taunted Asher, and in a post that has now been deleted because it was violating Blue Sky terms of service, he said that Asher's writing was full of peak faggotry. Asher immediately honed in on Willie Wiles and all of that banquet of problematic nonsense, and he proceeded to unload on Willie Wiles. And it was so intense that Willie Wiles went quiet. He pulled back no punches whatsoever. So it's actually kind of funny because, yeah, Asher reacted to Willie Wiles very much in a male-coded way. And that shows that when he treated Liana as a man, because, male-coded, she still got a much lighter treatment than, say, Willie Wiles got. And again, the evidence that shows that Liana's entire transphobia charge is completely fraudulent is the fact that in every contentious exchange that Asher has had with a trans woman, be it Sage and Audrey, Annie Gallagher, Poppy Diabolique, every single time, the tenor of those exchanges have been much milder than any exchange Asher had with men who were being contentious at him. If Asher were truly transphobic, he would argue with trans women the same way he argues with cis men, because he wouldn't actually believe that trans women were women. Now, of course, this is actually looking at things from the point of a reasonable person. But the thing that Liana Kerzner doesn't tell you is that I'm pretty sure that her entire assumption is that you shouldn't actually ever argue with trans women, because that is transphobic, no matter what it is that you argue about. There is no other potential conclusion that anyone can come to based on her actions and her complete lack of coherence. Now, of course, there's a caveat. It's all about arguing with trans women who are connected to Liana Kerzner. And the reason I say that is because, well, if you look at Liana Kerzner's Twitter history, which might start disappearing, which is why Asher has replicated her archive and will be up for perusal at your leisure, Liana Kerzner, despite what she has told everybody, was arguing angrily, viciously, and constantly with people on Twitter long before Asher and I even met her. And on Twitter, she has been called a transphobe way more times than Asher or I have ever been called. And by the way, the times that Asher and I have been called transphobes, actually, it all started with Liana Kerzner. Liana Kerzner is the one who's called us transphobes. And when she started it, her community started repeating it, even though, yeah. Let's take a look at Liana Kerzner's activity and history, shall we? Just a small sample of Liana Kerzner being called a transphobe while arguing with trans women. Now remember, this is the woman who said this about us in her Discord server. Incidentally, the alleged behind-the-scenes arguments never happened. This is in response to Naomi pointing out that in 2023, I posted a Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead meme when Pat Robertson died. Pat Robertson was instrumental in the Defense of Marriage Act, which kept Asher and me from being able to be married for the first 11 years of our relationship, and which also put me in immigration limbo until he was able to petition me for citizenship through marriage, because the Defense of Marriage Act prevented that. So, Naomi, you can go fuck yourself. I have all the right in the world to be glad that a man who actively tried to destroy the lives of many queer individuals is no longer around to continue to perpetuate that hurt. You were never touched by his policies in the same way that Asher and I were, and many, many others. And you basically claiming that I did that to win brownie points with my political party, which I don't belong to one specific political party, is the height of absolute privilege. And this is the kind of hypocrisy that you find in Liana Kerzner's server. And what I just did there, Liana Kerzner is going to tell you I was being transphobic because I went after a trans creator, completely dropping the context of what Naomi Pulperu said, my background, my history, and the reasons I have to be upset at her for saying that. Because it's all a game to Kerzner. It's all actual collecting brownie points on her end. In fact, one of my trans friends put this entire performative bullshit that Liana Kerzner engages in as the great defender of trans rights very, very succinctly. My friend Kat did observe one thing. She said that there is an enormous amount of sexism evidenced in this situation. And it is shown in the fact that Liana Kerzner has been abusing my husband for 18 months and no one has batted an eye. Whereas if the roles were inverted and a man with a large audience were berating a woman with a small audience and making up outrageous claims about her, everybody would be up in arms. But when it's a man being abused by a woman, nobody cares. Nobody cares. I mean, I know there are people who care. Those of you who have stood by him, it's very, very well. It's greatly appreciated. But I hope you can forgive me if I say that compared to the vast majority of silence and indifference, it can seem like nobody cares to a victim. And Asher is a victim. His mental, emotional, and physical health have suffered greatly. And the fact that none of her brainless audience looks at the grotesque scenario that this woman puts on, mocking individuals on her social media and on her videos, while still claiming to be some sort of advocate? What kind of insanity is this? And more importantly, where are the mental health practitioners and advocates? Why are they not seeing this and going, this is a massive red flag? Or are they too scared of Liana Kerzner and her litigious ways? What happened to this licensed practitioner who clearly identified the fact that Liana Kerzner is not qualified to treat autistic clients?
You're completely, one of the things somebody said to me recently was that I'm completely unqualified to deal with people with autism. Now, I didn't buy that. That was just them throwing their weight around. And then I told them, that is crossing the line in acting like, using your credentials. And you're not supposed to do that with somebody that you're not treating. And that was the last I heard from them. So good riddance.
Where are they? Where did they go? And that is actually sexism. Because you see, a woman can get away with this. A man? Yes. If a man were behaving like this, he should rightfully be labeled an abuser. So how come women aren't? How come there are plenty of Liana Kerzners out there? She's not the only one. That's something you should sit with and think about. Because, yes, good job on highlighting all of the male abusers, but you're letting all of the Liana Kerzners continue to damage people, like Song Erickson, Mitchell Jura, my husband, and you don't do anything about it. and the cost of remaining quiet? Song Erickson, in her video coming out of her cave, admitted that she spent more than a year essentially going completely offline, underground, terrified about the campaign of lies that Kerzner could conduct against her. She even went so far as on publishing her books. Ex-clients and friends talk to me, and they're afraid to talk in public because they're terrified of this woman, of her litigiousness, and the campaign of lies and slander and libel that she unleashes on her Discord server and her YouTube server and her radio show if you ever so much as start criticizing her in any fashion that makes her look bad. Is that the effect that a peer counselor should have? Is that the kind of record that indicates someone who should be trusted with people's mental health? Asher has justifiably written to her radio station requesting that his episode be taken down because Liana Kerzner is in fact exploiting him. The idiots at her radio station haven't even read the letters. Liana Kerzner claims that they essentially sent her the letters and asked her to explain, and she explained what it was. Nonsensical. You saw it in the last episode. I'm going to point something out. Liana Kerzner denies people the right of autonomy. She overrides their narrative. She steals their words out of their mouths and presents them as something else entirely of her own making. She is even incapable of understanding the notion of acknowledging someone else's argument and point, even if you don't agree with it. Because at one point, Asher said that all he really wished that she had done at one point was to acknowledge his grievance. And Liana Kerzner, whom at this point I honestly think does everything for attention, immediately translated it to Asher wanting attention right here. And why do I say she does everything for attention? Well, think about it. What is her go-to answer for why anyone does anything against her? They want attention. They want attention. They want attention. Emily Scully does it only for attention. We do it only for attention. In fact, in one episode, she claimed that we've gotten more attention going after her than we've gotten before in anything else. And I'm sorry, Liana Kerzner, but get the fuck over yourself. The only reason you matter right now is because you hurt people. Otherwise, you'd be unremarkable. People have told me that Liana Kerzner almost destroyed them, that she hurt them greatly, or that they think they still have scars from her that they won't potentially heal from for a long time, if ever. And these are clients, ex-Liana Cares clients, who are afraid of speaking up in public because of what this woman does. You'll notice she immediately equated acknowledgement of a grievance and the contents of an argument with attention. That is a deeply pathological mindset. Allow me to demonstrate what it's like to acknowledge someone's grievance or argument. I acknowledge that so-and-so believes that I have acted in this way or another, and they have their own side to this story, and I have my own. I have presented my evidence, and they have presented theirs. I believe that their evidence is wrong, but I believe you should look at both sides and come to your own conclusion. That is my standard position in any argument, and that includes Liana Kerzner. I want you to look at her claims and whatever evidence she produces, though she produces very little, if any at all. And then look at mine. And then I want you to notice something. Liana Kerzner will never in her entire life utter those words. They're lying. They're lying. They're doing it for attention. They're doing it for attention. They're lies. They're fake. That should really be a huge fucking red flag for you people. Those of you who are in her server. That is why you're a cult. And your cult has victims. And those victims are watching. And sooner or later, many of those will feel safe enough to start speaking up. Until then, though, what is the toll that Liana Kerzner takes on people? Lying about them, smearing campaigns about them, targeting their mental health to get them to spin out so that they look less credible? Well, you've heard the effects. You've heard the aftermath.
I don't want to because I'm not myself. They're also concerned about their memory. I don't know what to do. I can't do this. I can't do this. It's too much. I can't do it. It's so much. I'm buried under it.